Hi friends, I'm Educator Katie, and here at ZooMontana, I am our education coordinator. Today, we're going to be talking about animal adaptations. This science word has so many different definitions that we're going to tell you our definition today. Our definition of an adaptation is a tool that an animal uses to help them to survive. Now, it can be physical on their body, or it can be a behavioral one as well. So for example, physical, like an antler from a moose, or a deer, or an elk, or a shell, like of a turtle's. Or it can be that behavior, something that they do that helps them to survive, like living in social groups like many animals do. These are all adaptations that help animals to survive, okay? Now, we are going to be talking about adaptations of a specific group of animals today, the reptiles. Reptiles are generally considered to be the animals that are dry and scaly skinned. They are cold-blooded, and they typically lay eggs, though not all of them lay eggs. So we're going to meet our cold-blooded reptilian friend today and talk about his adaptations. All right, friends, this here is Harry, and Harry is a ball python. First of all, his name, ball python, gives away one of his behavioral adaptations right in the beginning. When ball pythons are scared, they actually ball themselves up. They turn themselves into a ball, wrap themselves up, and hide their head in the middle, because that head can then stay safe from predators. They can survive some scratches on their body, but they can't survive without a head. Now, there are so many other adaptations to talk about. We're just going to pick a few today. And the first one I wanted to talk about was that scaly skin. A lot of people are scared of snakes or think they're gross, and that's totally okay. The gross part, though, is pretty inaccurate because even though snakes look slimy and wet, they're not. Snakes have dry, scaly skin, and those scales are made of keratin. Keratin is the same material that's in your hair, in your fingernails. It's a very tough material and even makes up things like rhino horn. For snakes, that means that their skin is actually pretty tough and helps protect them from a lot of different things. However, it does mean that they do need to shed their skin when they need to grow, because keratin, while tough, is not particularly stretchy. So that is why snakes need to shed their skin like this. One of the other really amazing adaptations about snakes are the fact that they smell with their tongue. You smell with your nose, many other animals smell with their nose, but this animal smells with his tongue. He has nostrils, they're on the top of his head there, and those little nostrils just help him to breathe. They don't help him to smell. Instead, his tongue there flicks out into the air and grabs any smells in the air. And this is super, super powerful. With his sense of smell, he doesn't need any other sense to help him find food. He has a special organ on the roof of his mouth called the Jacobson's organ. And the Jacobson's organ is basically what's translating those chemicals that his tongue picks up for smells into what he is actually smelling. So he flicks out his tongue here, grabs those smells in the air, pulls it back into his mouth, plugs it into that Jacobson's organ, and that tells his brain what he's smelling. It's very powerful. This snake also has other adaptations that help it to survive, including good eyesight at night. He is a nocturnal snake, and he even has heat-sensing pits along the top of his upper lip. But he uses that tongue most of all. My last thing I'm going to talk to you about with snakes today is how big of something that they can eat. Despite this fact that he is a little bit over 4 feet long and has a pretty chunky body, he cannot eat me. He could bite me, and that's, a possibility if I were not respecting his space and if he weren't comfortable with people. But he can eat anything as big around as the biggest part of his body. So let's just look at that real quick, okay? Biggest part of his body is about here, right? About the size of a small apple. His head is like the size of 2 adults' fingers put together. He has a tiny little head, but he can eat something this big. If you look at it in human terms, it would be like if I could swallow a giant pumpkin whole. That's how big my shoulders are, right? Just stretch out and swallow a giant pumpkin. Clearly, we can't do that, but snakes can because of a few different adaptations in their jaw and in their throat. So not only do they have stretchy skin and muscles in their throat here, but their jaw is made up of different bones than ours. We have one bone in our lower jaw here, right? And that one bone makes sure that we don't open our mouth super wide. Our jaw is connected to our skull with some not very stretchy material because we don't want to choke. But snakes have 2 bones right here with a gap. This gap is filled with a connective tissue that is very stretchy. So not only can they stretch it to the side like this, but they have an extra bone on each side in the back here as well called the quadrate bone. And the quadrate bone allows them to almost hyperextend. They don't dislocate their jaw, but basically hyperextend their jaw, open super wide, and then stretch out that throat and swallow things bigger than their head. It's amazing. I hope you learned something super cool about Harry here and about snakes and their adaptations in general. Now it's your turn. Choose your favorite reptile and tell your teacher some of its adaptations. We'll see you next time.